What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, and I'm with my good, orderly friend over there, Mr. Brian Coors Hair. Brian, hello.
How you doing, Pete?
I'm great, man. I actually missed talking about The Last of Us. I know it's only been a week, but I really, really enjoyed that last episode, and I wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I feel like it feels like it's been longer than last. It was last Thursday when we talked about it,
Yeah.
but I guess I actually watched the show Sunday night, so it feels like it's been like a month.
Yeah, and I'm on spring break here in Texas, and we've just been super busy, so it does feel kind of like a month too. But today, for those of you guys that are joining us for the first time, we are covering The Last of Us episode 9, which was the season finale. It was entitled "Look for the Light," and then we're also going to cover The Mandalorian season 3, episode 3, which is entitled "The Convert." So we got two Pedro Pascals for the price of one today. So right off the bat, Brian, Ellie has the same origin as Blade, huh?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of getting that vibe from the brief preview we saw last week. Obviously, that is not something from the game. It was thought up by Neil Druckmann at some point to be used as some other alternate media, whether that was an animated like short or something, or it was even possibly going to be another DLC or something like that, but it never came to fruition. So it was nice that they actually got to put that in the show. They don't talk about why she's immune. It's just that's it. They don't ever say it.
You know, it's interesting. Do you like the explanation for why she's immune?
That's a good question. I feel like it is kind of funny that it's like the same idea as Blade. It works though. I don't think I think it's fine that they didn't explain it in the games. It worked well enough, and I think this is them adding this kind of accentuates part of the choice that Joel makes at the end of the episode, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights it in a way that's like, this was like a freak accident. This is not reproducible. Like this really is, and that's something that like I said, it heightens Joel's decision for the end of the episode.
Yeah, that is a really, really good answer. Because it's kind of like exactly what you said. What they choose to focus on in a show, that's really what's going to have the most emotional connection with us. And like the hows and whys of why she's immune, that's not as interesting as, oh, she's literally the only one that could save the world, and it's because of a freak occurrence. It's an occurrence that can't really be duplicated. And so this is a man that has to choose between, does he save this one girl that he loves, or does he save the world, And that's interesting. Honestly, I mentioned this in the notes, but I wasn't expecting the show to go this way. I know you played the game, so you knew everything that was going to happen. But when we were in 2 episodes ago, and Joel was hurt and he was infected, his blood was infected, not with the cordyceps.
Yeah, not with spores. Yeah,
right. I honestly thought that he was going to die because you kept talking about a time jump, and I was like, oh, is it going to be that he's dead and she's somehow survived on her own for a while? So I was actually surprised to see that, like, he was essentially like in his prime in this episode.
Yeah, the time jumps were kind of to like accentuate the seasons and things like that, and to give them some slightly different backgrounds to play with, I guess, in the game.
Yeah.
But they still sort of did the time jumps, but like in the game, it's like, oh, this is the winter, and then now this is spring or whatever. So
yeah.
they a little more clearly define that in the game than in the show, other than the fact that they showed snow, for the
it's interesting, because I say this every single time we review the show, but I watch it with my wife, and my wife's got her 2 cents, and she wasn't as blown away by this finale as I was. One of the points that she made was that Ellie seemed traumatized by what she'd done in the previous episode, where she just cut that guy to bits, and I guess she was going to essentially be eaten too, right? And so Sherry was like, oh, it's been months since that happened, and she's still this traumatized. And she's like, well, how come she wasn't this traumatized, from when the little kid was killed, when he had cordyceps, or how come she wasn't as traumatized when Tess died and stuff like that. And so I thought, to me, it was interesting that she still had this lingering kind of feeling, but I don't know necessarily if it was because of what she had done to that guy in the previous episode. Why do you think she was so haunted at the beginning of this episode?
So I think it's because this was a lot more. She was essentially fighting this guy off and surviving on her own for the first time. She didn't have anybody else's help. This was life and death for her. And I think, I mean, obviously we are straight white men. We have not ever felt we probably have not really felt the fear of being raped or anything like that. But that's what she went through essentially. I think that's a pretty valid reason to feel really like messed up for. And it could be a culmination of all the things. I mean, yes, Tess is a factor, but she didn't know Tess for very long. The little boy, was it Sam?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What was the brother's name then? Henry and Sam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, I think that probably hit a bit harder, but it's probably just the combination of all those things happening, just and the toll it's taken on her as a 14-year-old girl across this entire journey, and that just being like the latest, most horrible thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention about Henry and Sam is that you mentioned choosing this one person over the entire world. And I remember how I said they tweaked Henry and Sam's story a little bit, that he was like an informant, and he essentially chose his brother over this organization. So it was like I said that was going to come back later, and this is how it came back. So that was another addition that was a nice foreshadowing, I think, because at that point Joel was still like, Ellie is cargo. This is a job. Let me get this done. And now it's like, holy shit, I understand. I get it now. Like, he was criticizing him for his Henry for his actions. Now he's doing the same thing, if not worse.
Yeah. Really good point. And they would even kind of mention that when they were doing the after the episode commentary. They kept talking about this specific choice of your loved one versus other people and what you'll do for the people that you love. And they really talk about it at the end of this episode too. Megan Stockton has commented. Megan is a fantastic author. If you guys have never heard of her, her book Blue Jay is out right now on Godless. She's a good friend of mine, and she's got multiple books besides Blue Jay, but she has a really good point here. Megan wrote, I felt like it was the approach to the end of the road. So I think that maybe that might have been another reason why Ellie seemed kind of haunted, was because she knew that she was kind of coming up to this lab where she essentially could die. Like, I think that here's like another thing that Sherry said too. She was like, didn't Joel kind of expect that they would experiment on her and possibly kill her, considering that she could be the cure? And like, didn't he kind of know what he was getting into? And I think that regardless of what Joel thought, Ellie kind of knew that she was going to die. And I think that Ellie was okay with dying. I think that Ellie sort of felt like she had led other people to their death, including her friend Riley too.
I disagree there. I don't necessarily think that either of them assumed that the end result was her dying. I think that they thought they would run some tests, take some blood samples, she'd live in a lab for a little while or whatever. But I don't think that either of them ever. I mean, maybe it was a passing thought, but I don't think that they assumed like 100% fact that cure equals death of Ellie. Like, I don't think either of them thought that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, and to me, the big thing about Joel and his choice here is the fact that he doesn't consult Ellie at all. She doesn't have the opportunity to say what she wants to do, and that's a big, huge deal.
Yeah, I really want to go in depth about that last sequence, because that was something else. And but it looks like I missed one of Megan's comments here too. This is her first one that she put. I feel like with the game we are more strict POV. So we know what Joel knows. So we wouldn't know why she's immune. In the show, we are getting a fuller story with more character detail outside of Joel's direct experiences.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, still, they don't. I guess Marlene knows, but I mean, Ellie doesn't know why she's immune. So I guess that information is now lost essentially.
Yeah. So let's go back to her actual origin too, because there's a couple other points I wanted to make too. So Ashley Johnson played Ellie in the game, right?
Yes, and man, hearing the voice, and because I was playing the second game at the same time, when I was watching the finale, and you just hearing the voice is like really like holy shit, like that's so weird.
Yeah. And have you ever like watched Critical Role, or do you know about Critical Role at all?
I watched the I know what it is. I haven't watched too much of it, but I watched the first season of Vox Machina. So
Yeah. I too have also, because we're comic books transformed. I've read a couple of like prequel comics that were I think Dark Horse put them out, of Vox Machina, and then I have this awesome Critical Role book that like kind of talks about their world and also talks about like how they made the show. But I've yet to listen to the actual show. But I think Ashley Johnson's story is just like so cool that she was like this child actress on Growing Pains, and then she became
which I
this
didn't know until you wrote that down. I had no idea.
Yeah, but like, have you ever watched Growing Pains?
Yeah, no. The second you said it, I'm like, holy shit, that was Chrissy.
Right. She looks just like her, just like older, right? And I just think it's so cool that she's this iconic video game character. Then she's from this, like, essentially like the biggest D&D show ever, and now she's on this now too.
Yeah, and she's had a lot of other major roles too that I wish I could rattle off the top of my head, but I can't right now. But I mean, she's very accomplished as a voice actor as well.
As a voice actor, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So you were saying before that the sequence with Ellie's mom isn't in the game, but it's kind of like reference, and they were going to maybe make it a DLC. When I was watching that sequence, I kind of thought for a minute that she might do something that was similar to this movie called Cargo. Have you ever heard of that movie?
Cargo sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
It's kind of funny, right? Because we're talking about how like Joel treats Ellie like cargo. So okay, there was this short film, and it made me fucking cry just watching this short film. It was like 6 minutes or not even. And essentially, there was a zombie outbreak, typical zombie outbreak. This man has an infant, and it's the dad, and he has this infant. The wife's gone. I think they were in a car accident, and the wife's gone. And he sees that he was bitten by a zombie, and so he knows that he's going to die. He's able to sort of guesstimate like when he's going to die, and so what he does is he gets a balloon and he floats the balloon in front of him, and he has the baby behind him on a Bjorn, and then he is like essentially becoming a zombie, and he follows the balloon, and he follows it all the way to where there's humans, and then the humans shoot the zombie dad, and then they're able to save the baby. So essentially that the dad's final act is that he's able to walk. It's a great, you could probably look it up on YouTube, just like Cargo short film, and then they made it into a feature, and it had Martin Freeman, from The Hobbit and stuff.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought that they were going to do that with Ellie's mom. Were you kind of surprised, or just sort of think that made sense as to what happened when Marlene found her?
Yeah, no, it fits. It explains the relationship and how Marlene found Ellie and knows about it, why she cares at all, and again, the fact that they're saying they gave more depth to the relationship between Marlene and is it Anne?
Anne was the mom.
Anne. And it kind of again highlights the viewpoints of Joel versus Marlene, who they're essentially her quote unquote parents now, with the closest thing she has to them, and how they have different views. So I think it really did add a lot. It was a simple explanation. It wasn't overly like, scientific or anything like that, or, unbelievable. I mean, I guess it is unbelievable because it's, zombies and spores and whatever. But it fit. It was a nice little puzzle piece that fit in there rather well, I think.
Yeah. And, there's those trends that we keep seeing with this show, or, recurring things that we keep seeing with the show. Once again, you have a voice actor from the game. Something horrible happens to them in the show, right? But then once again for the show, someone gets shot in the head, but unlike The Walking Dead, it's done off screen. She walks right up to her, she holds the gun right at her, but then the shot is off screen.
Yes.
Got another comment from Megan too. She said they did a feature based on the short too, both super good, very sad. So she's talking about Cargo.
Yeah, the Martin Freeman, what you just mentioned, I believe. Yeah.
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 So what was the thing you were gonna say? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Well, yes, they do show that gunshot off camera there, but we see a few on camera later on.
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah. So let's see. I want to talk about that. I just want to see if there's anything in between that's real important. Well, I didn't write this in my notes, but they do talk about when Joel was going to shoot himself in the head, and then he essentially had second thoughts, and he doesn't shoot himself in the head in the moment. He flinched. So, do they talk about that in the game?
Yes, that is also from the game. It happens at the exact same point. Because they mentioned early on something about a scar or whatever, and then at that exact point, they're having one of those moments of connection where he opens up and says, this is why I have the scar, and he explained it if it was somebody else at first, but then he says, and that idiot was me.
Right.
And I think that was a nice way of telling it. And yeah, that's like directly from the game.
Wow. Yeah. I really enjoyed the fact that there was essentially like a role reversal by the time they got up to the Firefly hospital because, she was always the one that was talking so much and he was giving her like one word answers and not talking at all. And then now he was talking a lot. He said, like, should I get a guitar? He's all like excited about life. And she's just giving him one word answers.
Well, yeah. And they're talking about what they're going to do afterwards,
Yeah.
But he definitely noticed that what happened to her with David in the previous episode had a huge effect on her, and he was just trying to snap her out of it. And although we don't see much of the time where she's kind of out of it, you do get to see her kind of snap back into her usual self when they see the giraffe, which is also directly from the game, which I was very happy to see.
Beautiful, yeah, such a great scene. Have you ever seen giraffes like at the Staten Island Zoo or anything like that?
I have fed giraffes at Turtleback Zoo.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. All right. Sorry.
For a while, my son's favorite animal was giraffe. So like we went there like a bunch of times, and you just spend like $1. They give you a big thing of lettuce, and you just like hand it to them.
Where's Turtleback Zoo? What's that?
It's West Orange, New Jersey. So I actually used to play hockey in the rink right next to there too. So.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I wonder. Like those are probably CGI giraffe, right?
No, that was actually a real giraffe.
Oh, holy shit!
The one close-up giraffe was real. I actually thought it was fake too, but I had to look it up. That was real, but all the others in the background later on in the wider shots, those were all CG.
Okay, so I love asking you the difference between the game and the show. Is it essentially like the same where he brings her to the hospital and then Marlene is there, or is Marlene not there?
She's there. Yeah, it's very similar. There's a little bit more of like an exploration sequence in the game because like you actually like fall in some kind of like weird sewer and something like that, and then when you get out of that area, that's when the Fireflies find you, and like because Ellie couldn't swim, so she was unconscious from not being able to from almost drowning essentially, and that's when the Fireflies find them and they bring them to the hospital. So she's not even aware that she was there at all. It seems like in the show, she was awake and and was spoken to at least in some capacity. Unlike the game, like so in the game, she just has no idea what's going on. She wakes up in the car and like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, one of the things that was real interesting was that when they take the IV out of her arm, I guess they sort of like cut her arm. And so she has like a little bit of a scar there, and she notices that in the backseat of the car.
I don't remember that actually, but
yeah. So when she's all groggy and she wakes up in the back of the car, she's looking at her arm, right? And she's got the usual spot where she was like bitten or whatever before, and then just below that is where the IV was, and so there's an extra mark there, and so she's like, "Wait, what happened here?" She doesn't say anything, but she makes this face like,
"Oh yeah, okay," and she touches it. Okay, yeah, that does sound familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, in the game, are you like playing Joel like 80% of the game and then like 20% you're Ellie?
You don't play Ellie. You play as Ellie in that one sequence in winter and the very, very end. So actually the conversation they have after the whole hospital, you're walking as Ellie, not Joel. But I would say it's closer to like 90-10, if even.
Okay. And then I couldn't understand where they went in the end. Did they go to where Tommy lives? Did they go back to where they came?
Yep.
Okay.
Back to Wyoming. Jackson, Wyoming.
Okay, so that's why I was confused too, because like Joel says something along the lines of like, what was it? What's his daughter's name again? I'm sorry.
Sarah.
Yeah, he's like, oh, Sarah used to climb through here all the time. So it was like they're
No,
implying
no,
that,
he was talking about Sarah, saying that you would have been good friends with her.
right.
They had never been there before because they grew up in Texas.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like Austin. Okay, I guess I got a little confused. I don't know. My mind was probably blown because of that fucking shootout sequence that just went through the whole finale there. And so we mentioned this like last week that it seems a lot like that Wolverine and then like his young female sidekick kind of thing, where Ellie was essentially kidnapped. I mean, this is essentially the same thing that happened at the end of the last episode too, where Joel is just like taking people out so you can get to Ellie, and that must have been kind of exciting to play in the game, right? Like trying to go get her.
Yeah, because you're presented with that exact same conversation. You wake up in the hospital, they're telling you that she's going for surgery, she's not going to live, and there's only one soldier escorting Joel out of the hospital, but it doesn't even go as far as it did. Like they take like 3 steps out of the room, and he's just like, "Fuck you guys."
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was saying to Sherry, I was like, okay, so she's giving orders to the guy. She's like, okay, take him down here. If he tries anything, I'm like, okay, so go down here, get killed. I was just like these guys are so dead in 2 seconds.
Yeah, they take 3 steps out of the room, and he kills the guy. So.
Yeah. And so I mean, it even seemed like a video game, that sequence too, because like he just kind of puts a gun down, then he picks up another gun, and he goes shoot some other guys, But to me, it was just so well done. They kept focusing on his feet, and his feet would kind of like turn, and you'd see like a bullet casing fall to the ground. I just thought it was really well done, and I felt like really pumped, even though in the back of my mind I'm thinking, oh no, what is he doing?
Yeah. And this was probably the most accurate scene of gameplay in the entire show, because he really does murder that many people in that. Now that's kind of what the whole game is like with the other sections, because like I keep saying over all these reviews that you have to have something to do and to challenge you and overcome. But how I feel the story has been better conveyed in the show because of the lack of violence.
Yeah.
And then in this sense, it's actually heightened by it because of the lack of it previously. It's like, you did what you had to do, and it's kind of more understandable. But here it's like, holy shit, you're really going out on a limb for this here, and I think it plays so much better here.
Yes.
Because of that.
Yeah, and I know you've talked over and over again about how like there's so many more enemies and things like that. It really does seem like the infected are almost like not even present in the second half of the show, right? Because like, obviously we see one infected in the flashback with the mom in this episode. I don't think we see any infected in the modern day in this episode at all, right?
Nope.
Right, and then in the previous episode, yeah, there's none in that episode. And then when they're in Tommy's area, right, there's no infected then either, right?
No, so we haven't seen an actual. I mean, we saw the flashback with Ellie, but we haven't seen it infected since that horde came out of the ground in Kansas City.
Yeah. So, Brian, I know that we write our notes, but I'm about to hit you with a question, and it's actually pretty fucked up of me to be asking you this on a live recording.
Oh, no.
You're in Joel's shoes. Your son has the cordyceps infection like Ellie, and you have to choose, do you let them experiment on your son and save humanity, or do you save your son?
Well, if we're talking death here, obviously, right?
Because that was my assumption. My assumption was that they were going to take her brain out of her head.
No. I'm saying in this situation, because I mean, it's very clear in the show that brain death, like she's dead if they experiment on her.
Right.
This is something that's heavily debated about this game. When it came out, who was right, like which was the right way to go. And I think when you put yourself in the shoes, I think it's a lot easier to make the decision that Joel makes. He's not losing anything. It was the right decision for him to make. It's not a right or wrong decision, but it was the right decision for him. So I if I was in that position, I without question would do the same thing.
Yeah. I was thinking that like if
I wouldn't be able to do the same thing because I would probably be shot in the first 5 seconds.
Yeah. Those fucking soldiers, man, he just took him out so easily on those steps, man. He's such a badass. They've really made. I think that Pedro Pascal is more of a badass on the show than the Mandalorian.
Well, no, he's less of an idiot.
He's less of an idiot, and that is going to be a big talking piece of our next discussion. But and I want to segue over to Mando in a second. But before we get there, I want to bring up this one last point. Unless do you have anything else you want to say about Last of
Yeah.
Us?
So before we've talked about the previous voice actors on the show all have coming to grim ends. There was another voice actress who appeared, and one of the nurses in the operating room voices a character from the second game, and she does not die. So
Oh, look at that.
that's not all. It's not all death on the show
Yeah.
for previous voice actors.
Right.
And just in general, we didn't really talk about the very very last conversation that Joel and Ellie have, where Ellie's essentially like saying like, "Tell me you're not lying," and he says he's not, but you
I
can
swear.
clearly tell that she knows, and she just doesn't know what to do with the information because she can tell something's up. She wants to see if she'll be honest with him, and he's not. And I think that's understandable too. But I really liked how that was literally the last thing in the game and the show. Like that was the last line.
That is awesome. That is really cool. Yeah, well, that's a good segue though into the last point I wanted to make though, which is that Craig Mazin, who's not the creator, right? Neil Druckmann is the creator, and Craig Mazin is the guy from Chernobyl that came on. At the very end of the behind the scenes, he says, "This is the reason why The Last of Us is the most beautiful video game ever. Like the story of The Last of Us is the most beautiful video game story." And I was thinking the way that it translated into like premiere HBO television, I think maybe he's right. Like we've talked about adaptations of video games and how a lot of them are kind of subpar, and there does seem to be that kind of curse. And this just, like you said last episode, I think if people didn't even know it was a video game, they wouldn't necessarily think it was. Would just sort of accept that it was an HBO show.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I know that you have a lot of video game experience. Are there any other video game stories that you would consider like beautiful, like really great stories?
Oh, of course, yeah. Although I'm not going to be able to name anything off the top of my head right now, but I mean, there have been plenty of games that have got me all riled up, like this one. I think this game is, it really is written like that prestige HBO kind of show. I think it definitely appeals to that common denominator that those kind of shows have that people kind of can all identify with. That being said, there are tons of things that we as like comic and sci-fi nerds and all that, whatever, all the stuff we read that can kind of get you in that, but it's not as easily accessible or as easily to emotionally connect to because it's like super high concept or really far-fetched or something. So I think it's possible, but I think with this show, this is like a really great refined example of a prestige show made as a video game turned into a show. And I think that it's not the only kind of show that the only kind of thing that can give you that kind of feeling, but it's just one that a lot more people can relate to, I think.
Whoa, that was primo, man. You should have been on the fucking behind the scenes for that episode. That was awesome. I was just thinking, I was like, okay, what video game stories do I know of that are really good? And I don't think that like it has necessarily the emotional impact, but I know that there's been two stories that you've told me about that sound like really great stories. And one of them, maybe it's not fair because I know it's a novel series first. And then the other one, I know they made it from scratch, but I'm thinking about The Witcher, and then I'm thinking about Mass Effect, right? And I know that maybe they're not these like emotional stories, but like I know, for instance, that The Witcher they made into that Netflix show, and that a lot of people say that they did the game and the books a disservice. Like the show is nowhere near as good as the game or the books.
Yeah, there's a lot of backlash after season 2 with how they did characters. The Witcher 3 is really good. I actually think The Witcher 3 shines better in its kind of, and this is really what they took from the books, is these kind of like morally gray like stories that come up that you come across in your overall quest. The end story is actually kind of like a little more cliche and typical, and I don't think it had the weight that some of the other side stories had in the game. But there's excellent writing in that game throughout, and Mass Effect is actually a great example. A lot of people had a real hard time with that ending because
Mm-hmm.
they and I think it was fantastic, honestly. But I can understand. I also see the point of view, but where it fails. There was a very basic choice at the end, and it felt like that choice really didn't matter. Well, like it was. They were all different, but what you saw afterwards was very similar. Um, but there are tons of games. I mean, I could cite probably 15 Square Enix RPGs that have had that kind of effect on me, and God, there's probably countless other games that have had really emotional stories that you really connect with.
We had at least like one Final Fantasy, right?
Oh, all of them. I would probably say the the one that got me the most probably was 10 because they pull out some whammies to you on that one at the end of that game.
Nice.
Um, and but yeah, there are definitely others too that I wish I would have thought more about that before coming on here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, it's okay. I mean, it just proves a point that like, actually, I mean, I could not say it better than the way you said it before. It's like this video game, it's really well told. It's got really great writing, but it's a very accessible story, and I think that that's why people, uh, just love it so much or just got into it. And now you have been playing not Mass Effect, Last of Us
Plus
2,
two.
right?
Yes, I beat it the other night. I had never played it until getting towards the end of this show. I started it, and man, I am so curious what they're gonna do. So as I mentioned, I was been watching a like a replay of the cutscenes of one just to kind of refresh my memory on it because I didn't want to replay it again with all the other crap I'm playing. But I did squeeze in two. So the playthrough of just the cutscenes of one is about 3 hours. The playthrough of two is over 8. So
Oh shit.
they've already said that the second game will take multiple seasons to adapt,
That's
and
what I was
I'm
thinking.
so curious how they're going to do so many of the things they do in this game, just narratively and plot wise, and how they're going to break it up. I am so incredibly curious because there was a lot of controversy with this game too.
Yeah. Well, so Megan has some more points here, and then I also that reminded me of one thing that you were saying. Talk about like The Last of Us 2, is that Neil Druckmann, the guy that made The Last of Us, he also made Uncharted, and Uncharted they made that into a movie, for instance, and that did not do well, and people didn't like that. So it's like
Um,
even go ahead.
yeah, I didn't. I mean, I actually didn't play the Uncharted games, and Megan also mentions Red Dead Redemption 2. It's another very highly acclaimed game, which I have not played. Um, and I would like to someday. But it's one of those kind of like open world games that it's going to take you, 100 hours to do or something, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always cited as one of those really great games too. And then her next comment is, yeah, don't look too much into that next comment if you don't want to be spoiled.
I don't want to be spoiled. Yeah. She wrote the golf scene in Last of Us 2, so there's some kind of
Yeah. So yeah, there's this Last of Us 2 was a very, very controversial game. There is a lot of discourse. Like if you imagine people were arguing about, the choice of Joel's choice in this, it gets so much more intense in the next game. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to do this. And I'm sad that it's probably going to take us like a year and a half to get to that point to even see the beginnings of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm intrigued, and I am definitely down for watching The Last of Us season 2 when it comes out. I give you credit, Brian, because Megan's comment right here that you saw the end of RDR2. You knew that was Red Dead Redemption. When I saw that, I was like, did you just say R2D2? I was like so thrown off for a second. Okay, so I get it. Okay, so she wrote the end of Red Dead Redemption 2 got me. I would absolutely watch an adaptation if you follow the good guy character redemption choices arc. So I guess it's like
that's a Western game. So
yeah.
it's a totally different kind of setting. And I played I played Red Dead Revolver, which is sort of like a prequel of the style of game, but I never played Red Dead. Oh, I played a little bit of the first Red Dead Redemption actually, but I didn't play 2 because I didn't finish 1, and I don't think they're even connected. So it probably doesn't matter if but I like to finish things before I go on to the next one.
Well, you said that that's essentially an open world game where like you're able to do what you want to do. Last of Us is very like linear, right? Where it's not
Oh,
like
very, yeah, it's completely linear. Yeah, you're. I mean, there are some little side paths you can go, but ultimately you're walking along a curvy line. You know,
you can't shoot the giraffe though, right?
you cannot shoot the giraffe.
Okay, good. All right. Well, that is a good stopping point for Last of Us 2. And now we can move on to the Mandalorian. Hopefully, Megan, this part won't bore you too much, but we have more Pedro Pascal coming y'all's way. We have the Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, The Converts, which was Chapter 19 of the Book of the Mandalorian. So, did you watch that Mr. Sunday clip, Brian?
I did. I did. And I agree. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's just, it's a little more, blunt way of putting it. But yeah, he's an idiot. But yeah, he's a stylish idiot. So I don't know. It's just sometimes it bothers me here. And like we got the confirmation that he literally just fell into the water wearing full armor. I wish the Mythosaur grabbed him. But then I guess they need to hold back that Bo-Katan saw it and knows it's there and nobody else does for later.
Yeah. Like that's just been this ongoing thing that Brian and I, we haven't actually covered the previous 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. Brian and I are doing it for the first time for season 3, but we did cover the Book of Boba Fett, and just like an ongoing thing is we keep going back and forth about how he is just like this cool like killing machine sometimes, but then he also seems kind of clueless at other times. And in the previous episode, he just basically fell like a stone, down into the depths of the living waters below the mines of Mandalore. And so he's rescued by Bo-Katan, and they go to leave, but she curiously does not mention that she saw the Mythosaur. Was that sort of a shocker for you, or what'd you think?
Yeah, but the second, very early on in the episode, after she comes up, she does not remove her helmet. It's very obvious. She says, "This is the way." She repeats it. I'm like, "Oh shit, I know what she's doing." Like it was very obvious. And then I saw the title card, The Convert. I'm like, "Oh, that's that." But I think that can be taken 2 ways, really. But I can see where they're going with it. And I think this is a fairly creative way to get around the previous complaints I've had in the last 2 episodes about the adherence to the way and the helmets not coming off. What to do with Grogu in general. Well, actually, that's not really solved yet, but how to deal with Bo-Katan being around, not having the Darksaber, and her not wanting to kill and challenge him for it. I can start to see where they're painting this.
Okay, well, I'm very curious about that. So, are you saying that like you think she's sort of like playing them, that she's basically gonna like trick them?
No, I think she's gonna try and kind of try and take over that group on whatever the hell planet that is, the group of the Children of the Watch. She's gonna try and lead them because she has nothing left now. Her home's destroyed. No one was there anyway. So okay. This is a group of her people. She's technically also redeemed, by pure coincidence. And I think she's gonna roll with it and try to gather influence and lead them back to what I'm not sure. Maybe it'll eventually be against Din so she can get the Darksaber. I'm not really sure, but they could go that direction now at least.
Okay, so in her heart of hearts, though, she is not like converted to the way.
I don't think so.
No, that's my one thing that I'm kind of worried about, and I mentioned this in the notes a lot too, because we talked about this last time and the time before that, but Jon Favreau is the showrunner. He has written most of the episodes, or I think all the episodes. Maybe he co-wrote one, and then I know that he works with Dave Filoni though. And Dave Filoni is very much like inspired by George Lucas's vision and George Lucas's vision for the prequels, right? Have you ever heard Dave Filoni talk about the Duel of Fates by any chance?
Yes.
Yeah. Just for anyone who's wondering what the hell I'm talking about, there's this awesome, amazing song at Phantom Menace where, the Duel of Fate song is like the song of that movie. And Dave Filoni says basically that song, the title "Duel of Fates," applies to Anakin, and how essentially the battle with Qui-Gon and Darth Maul and Obi-Wan is over like Anakin's future, his fate, right? And his fate kind of gets sealed when Qui-Gon gets killed. And Dave Filoni obviously does it way more eloquently than I just did, but it just shows how like deeply he thinks about this stuff. And I think with Star Wars in general, there is this idea, at least in the movies that are in the Skywalker saga, that like if you adhere to like a dogmatic belief, then it's going to lead to your doom. Do you kind of feel that way too, or do you think that is I'm kind of stretching there?
Yeah, the crux of the Dave Filoni argument is that Qui-Gon knew that the Jedi Order needed to change, and he needed the rules to bend a little bit, and bending the rules would have allowed Anakin to prosper rather than fall to the dark side, because he was kept so rigidly under their doctrine. So that's what it was. That's what I got out of that, at least anyway. So yeah, and I think it's funny too that we were talking about Last of Us in the last episode. How every time you see like a Christian person in the show, they're evil, essentially. Yeah. So it's like it's almost funny that this is a religious order. They're even called a cult, and they're maybe not the bad guys. And I guess that's interesting because it is. I'm not a religious person by any means. But I don't necessarily think if you're religious, that means you're a bad person. I think some people take it too far, absolutely. But I don't think everybody does.
Okay, that's interesting. Because last week when we talked about the show too, we talked about how like maybe they had some ideas at the beginning, but they've sort of changed over time based on the reaction to the show, right? So do you think that like when we found the armorer and the other people, that initially they were kind of being treated like a cult, and since people say like this is the way all the time and they're like really into the Mandalorian mindset, do you think that the story maybe has shifted from, oh man, these people are like these unreasonable cultists where you got to keep your armor on all the time, to, hey, maybe we should keep our armor on all the time and follow the old ways?
I would not be surprised if people latched onto that phrase and then they just kind of ran with it and changed the story to make them look better than they initially may or may not have intended initially.
Wow. I said this on Twitter, but I was like, I guarantee there's at least one cosplayer out there that has adopted this way of life and just basically wears Mandalorian armor every day, all day.
Oh, there has to be.
There has to be one, right?
God, there's I don't remember what franchise it is, but there is some guy out there that like changed his name. It might have even been Star Wars, honestly. Like he changed his name to some character, and he like lives like that. I think it was Star Wars. I think someone actually like lives by the Jedi Code or something like that. And oh my God, I think I saw it on like Tosh.0. I swear to God, I think that's actually what it was.
Well, dude,
so, yeah, I would not be surprised if there is someone that's doing that. Although, however impractical it is.
Well, come on, there's a great example in our own favorite fandom, right? Transformers. There's a guy who legally changed his name to Optimus Prime.
That's true.
But Transformers, until we get to like the James Roberts stuff, there isn't really a sort of like a way of life for Transformer characters.
Yeah.
That's a whole another fucking video right there. Anyway, going back to the Mandalorian though. So did Grogu fucking say this is the way too?
I didn't hear that at all. I may have to go back and rewatch the beginning. It was the beginning, you think he said?
Yeah. So they're all on the ship. They're all in Bo-Katan's ship, right? And Mando says, "This is the way," and Bo-Katan says, "This is the way." And then Grogu just kind of makes this noise and goes like that. And it sounded like when you put a glove on your hand and it kind of like makes it kind of stretches. It was like.
I'll have to rewatch that to see if I hear that, but I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, go. It's in the first 10 minutes, so it'll be easy to find. Okay. So the episode's called The Converts, and we actually have not talked about the main story of the episode, which is about Dr. Pershing.
Yes. A lot of people have been saying that they felt the Mandalorian was trying to pull an Andor with the plot of this episode. And it sort of works, I think. I definitely miss the real backgrounds and backdrops rather than the volume. There's a couple shots there I'm like, wow, this looks real bad.
Yep. Like when they're in that like Imperial Fair, not Imperial, it's the New Republic, but they're in that like fairground.
Yeah, and they had those glowing ice pops or whatever. Yeah, that looked pretty bad. And when they first got to that shipyard at the end, it didn't look so hot. But I definitely prefer the the real backgrounds. I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, it doesn't help. Like there's a YouTube video where it has Andy Serkis's speech and then Stellan Skarsgård's speech from that same fucking episode of Andor. Like they both have amazing speeches, and someone put a YouTube video where it was like both of them back to back, and I was just like, oh my god, this is what we were watching like a couple of months ago, and now there's this, and it's amazing because it really is a testament to how different something can be based upon the dialogue or like the lack of dialogue, the editing, the cinematography, the way it's filmed, because this was a very similar story as far as like subject matter to Andor.
Yeah. I mean, it's just what happens with what happened to the Empire after Return of the Jedi. And it's the Andor showed the real depths of what the Empire was capable of here, and we're kind of seeing like that ugly side of the New Republic, which is interesting. I mean, like it's actually kind of interesting and cool that they had that amnesty program. I think that's an interesting idea, but the fact that they give them like fucking labels, like that's some backward shit.
Yeah, they're just numbers.
That's and then they have this like brilliant scientist guy, and they just have him doing like archival work and all that, not using to the full extent. It's kind of like, to me, how in the real world, how just everyone in the government is just incapable. In my, neither side is good. One's worse than the other, I guess, because of other things, but like really, they're both incompetent.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? Going along with that, Star Wars definitely makes it seem like the best time to be in Star Wars is when there's a galactic civil war, right? Because like Andor is after the Empire's taken over, and it's before the rebellion starts. It's right before the rebellion really kicks in, and you just see how miserable life is in Andor, right? And then this show is like 5 years after the fall of the Empire, and so we see like, oh, well, it kind of sucks in the New Republic too. So it's always like, if you're not fighting in the Galactic Civil War, then you're in some kind of like weird bureaucratic, like dead end job, fucking miserable corporate nightmare.
Yeah.
Where you're lucky to get travel biscuits.
Yeah, I would love me some travel biscuits.
Yes. Those look like kind of like British tea cookies, like my grandma used to get.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I need to get the actress's name. I think it's Katie O'Brien, right?
Katie O'Brien, yes.
So Katie O'Brien, my note that I made here was that she was in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and I liked her so much better in this than I did in that. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like they had intended more for that character in the Ant-Man movie. And like you said, she just kind of have like a silly costume. What did you call it?
She looked like an extra in the 1990s Power Ranger movie.
Yes. Yeah. Perfectly said. Like just nail on the head. And it definitely took it away from that a little bit. But in this, she's definitely able to flex a little bit more here. And I'm very curious about who she's working for or with and what her ultimate goal is here. To me, the implications of showing Dr. Pershing is that this has something to do with setting up the First Order and Snoke and the eventual return of Palpatine. But I guess I don't understand why they nuked his brain at the end. So I'm a little confused there. Like, did they just legitimately get caught and she just like sold him out to save her own ass, or was that real or not? I mean, I read somewhere saying that every time she spoke or something like that, there were these like sinister imperialist sound cues with her, which I did not pick up on at all. But like, to me, she's definitely not on the up and up. But her turning up that mind flare thing kind of threw me for a loop because I didn't understand why.
Okay. Okay. So let's unpack that. There's a lot right there, right? Um, when you go throughout the course of the episode, you start to think different things about her, right? At first, you're like, okay, well, there's something shady because they show her first. She comes into his speaking, like he does that at the opera house. He has like this speaking engagement, and they show her come in. So it's like, okay, she knows about him. She's coming to watch him. She has interest in him. Then there's the whole sequence where like she gives him the biscuits, and then like she's kind of leading him on, and you're like, okay, so is she going to like get him to go back to the Empire? I think that's what I thought the majority of the
Yeah.
time. Is that what you
So,
thought too?
so first off, just a little side tangent. Why was he giving a speech to the Senate? I didn't really pick up on that. Like he's
So,
like, I thought by him giving the speech and saying he was talking about his work on genetics and cloning, and you'd like to continue it or something like that. I thought they would have him doing something more important than archival stuff. So that kind of was a conflict to me. Like I don't understand why he was speaking there if they have him doing this mundane shit. It doesn't make any sense there. But I think the important thing is that they both served under Moff Gideon. So are they implying that potentially that Katie O'Brien, is it Elia
Kane.
Elia Kane, that she is still somehow in contact with Moff Gideon and is kind of cleaning up after his messes, and then he may still be alive and out there somewhere, or like or is it like I said, like she was literally trying to get him to help and join their side, and they got caught, and she just sold him out to save her own skin.
Oh man. Okay. Well, that's really good. I want to talk about that first contradiction that you mentioned. So I watched Star Wars Explained because I mean he's just fantastic. YouTube channel Star Wars Explained, and he was talking about, he referenced a thing called Operation Paperclip, which essentially is where like they took Nazi scientists and they had them work for the U.S. government after World War II, right?
That's how we get Captain America.
Right, exactly, right. Or like the Manhattan Projects, right? Jonathan Hickman, right? But anyway, it's funny. I really love that point that you make of like he has this big speech where he talks about his mother dying and all this kind of stuff, and then essentially it's like it's like this Nazi scientist being like, I did such revolutionary work, but I'm so glad to be part of this cause, and then it just cuts to him like shredding paper in a paper shredder.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much what his job is, right?
Yeah.
And so to go back to what you were saying though about what's Elia's motivation, like what is she truly doing? I was uncertain as to what was going on too, even by the very end. The way that I read it was like she still has loyalty to the Empire, whether she is in direct contact with Moff Gideon or anyone else. She still is loyal to the Imperials. Because I think her eating the biscuit is definitely like, I'm still loyal to the Empire.
Yeah, and I could also see. I think Moff Gideon was kind of like off on his own, so he was almost like I don't know, like a Red Skull,
like a renegade. Yeah.
Red Skull is like an offshoot of the Nazis, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, with Hydra.
She even could be working for whatever group is trying to resurrect Palpatine directly.
That was another thing that you talked about, which I thought was fucking beautiful. You brought that up. So that's a little thing that they just drop in there kind of casually. But Dr. Pershing, when he's doing his speech, he says something along the lines of, with my idea with cloning, it was like you take the attributes of one person and you take the attributes of another person and you mix them together. And it's like, okay, well, what does that say about Grogu? Because the idea is that Grogu is a cloned being, right?
I'm not sure about that, but I think that they were just looking for force sensitive blood.
Okay.
Because midichlorians and all that crap.
Yeah.
And I think you remember in the Obi-Wan show when he was in that base, that underwater base, whose name I can't remember. They had all those dead Jedis encased in amber. I think that was, for experiments like Dr. Pershing's. They're taking powerful DNA, mixing them together, almost kind of like Mr. Sinister would do in X-Men.
Yes. Okay, that's good. And actually, honestly, it makes me think that Grogu isn't a clone and that he just is like a force-capable being, and that like they just want to use him.
Yeah, and he's just a rare occurrence. I mean, that species is, we don't even know what the species is called. We've only seen 3 of them ever, and there aren't many force-sensitive people left around because they were mostly executed.
we were talking about the cloning, and maybe it was like the Emperor's coming back, and it's gonna like all lead into that. That's what you think is ultimately the arc for the show?
I don't know if that's the ultimate arc of the show, but I think that they're trying to fill in some gaps for like where Snoke came from and how Palpatine came back. Because we all know that in the Rise of Skywalker that somehow the Emperor came back is very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
So I think if they're trying to retroactively make that movie better, I mean, more power to them, I guess. But I don't know if it's going to work or not. But uh, yeah, I would say that I would buy that Snoke was like a first attempt at recreating the Emperor, and it got all messed up. Trying to combine two sets of DNA together, and it just came out all weird looking like that.
Yeah.
Because we get no information about what he is or where he's from or anything like that. So
Yes.
it's a hole that could be filled, and I think it could work.
Yeah. I know that there's at least one novel that is about like Lando and Luke going after like Sith artifacts or something like that, and supposedly it like kind of fills in some gaps for the Rise of Skywalker and for the sequel trilogy in general. I really want to check out that book. I think it's called like Shadow of the Sith, but that's one of the beauties of Star Wars is like using sort of like the ancillary media to kind of patch up the problems of the main movies, and I'd be okay with Mandalorian doing that. I bet you $50 that it's going to be like a bigger arcing thing that's going to involve the Ahsoka show and whatever else they got going on.
Yeah, Dave Filoni has pretty much confirmed that there's going to be some kind of event. They haven't like flat out said it, but he said that something is coming here. I'm guessing that's going to be the Ahsoka show. I'm assuming that means the Jude Law Skeleton Crew show. And I don't know what else because the Acolyte is pre Old Republic, I believe.
So
Right?
okay, so for the Old Republic, there's a time period called the High Republic when the Republic is doing really
Yeah.
well, and it's like thousands of years before A New Hope.
Well,
And
I think the Acolyte is supposed to be pre High Republic. I think.
no, it takes place at like the end of the High Republic.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah. Believe me, I kind of like the High Republic stuff. I just finished one of the High Republic books. I've read a couple of them. Me and Mike Bongiorno, either on this channel or my ANCHORPETE channel, I've covered a couple of the books. It's a really cool time period too because it's sort of like the inverse, like the Jedi are badasses and are doing really well. And Charles Soule, comic book writer, has written a couple of the books. They're really good.
That's always good.
Yeah. But I talked to this one dude in a comic book store a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that he thinks that the event that you're sort of talking about is going to take place in like an area called like wild space or untamed space or some kind of shit like that. When that show Rebels ended, it ended with like Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra, the main character, going off into these weird regions of space, and he thinks that that's where the Star Wars is going to focus moving forward. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't heard the specifics of it, but it makes sense. I mean, that seems to be what the Ahsoka show is going to be about.
Yeah,
Is her search for Ezra and
yeah,
then Thrawn.
yeah,
So it would be interesting if it was all. I mean, I feel like it needs to more tie into the Mandalorian because
yeah,
that seems to be the center of this little um, post Empire universe, mini universe here.
yeah.
So, and that seems like it's very rebel centric, and I don't exactly see how or why the Mandalorian fits into that, unless they're out there and they come back for some reason.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. I don't know. It's kind of a super exciting time, right? Because you're not relying on like any kind of Skywalker people at all, and it's not a big Jedi thing. It's just sort of like, well, what's happening here? And I like the idea of Grand Admiral Thrawn coming back. We talked about Moff Gideon a bit in this episode already. I think that Moff Gideon is probably going to end up being like a not a disciple, but like a a like a second in command to Thrawn or something like that.
Maybe. I definitely think it'll be exciting to see Thrawn in live action though. So
Shit, yeah. So what else we got about this episode? Oh, okay. Here's one part that I really liked. I like the fact that he's going to have that mind flayer just scramble his brains, and there's this Mon Calamari scientist talking to him, and Dr. Pershing turns to him and he's like, "It was a trap, right?" Did you notice that?
Yes.
I fucking love that. Oh man.
Yeah. I laugh out of that.
Yeah. But I felt bad for him too. Um, and one other comment I want to make too is that they decide to go rogue, and so they take like a little flying subway car ride down to these lanes where they're basically taking apart Imperial ships, and it reminded me of like taking the subway in New York. Did it remind you of that too?
Yeah, but I don't think I've ever I don't think I've ever tried to evade fare or anything like that by running down a train.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of archaic too, right? Because like when you go on the Staten Island train, someone used to check your ticket, but then in Staten Island, they don't even check for tickets or
Yeah,
anything. They just
it's
take
all
the
free.
train for
Yeah,
free.
you only pay when you go on the ferry. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. And then in Manhattan, all you do is just swipe your Metro card. And I thought that's kind of what they did. They basically like jumped the turnstile.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And then these robots came after them. Yeah, and then they just ended up jumping off. Um, but it's funny, they mentioned days of the week in this too.
Yeah, that was very interesting because, like you said, like I don't think I've ever heard a day of the week or any kind of. I mean, they definitely mention different kind of units of measurement and all that, but I don't think I've ever heard much about like days or months or anything like that. Or
Right. And they mentioned like at least 2 days of the week. They were like Pong's days, right? So some kind of shit like that. Yeah, and
I guess it's Mondays.
yeah, like I've read a shit ton of Star Wars books and comics, and I've watched a whole bunch of Star Wars shows, and I don't think anyone's ever mentioned a day of the week ever.
Yeah,
And then
you
another
might
thing
read
is,
more than me, but yeah, I've never seen anything either.
and then also besides that, they decide to go rogue, and one sign of when you go rogue in Star Wars is you have to pop your collar on your coat.
Nothing says
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. What was that?
nothing says undercover shenanigans like a pop collar.
Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah. I mean, what do you think is going to happen next on the show?
Uh, yeah, I don't know because I don't know where if they're gonna how they're gonna pick up on that on Ella Kane's character moving forward and how it's even gonna tie into what the Mandalorian's doing. Other than unless they're still chasing down Grogu for more of his blood or something like that. But I definitely think we're gonna see some kind of hostile takeover of the Children of the Watch by Bo-Katan.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm all down for that. One thing I keep remembering is they show a scene of like Mandalorians jumping out of a ship with their jetpacks, and it looks like they're like attacking somewhere. I have no idea what that is going to be, but I keep waiting for that moment.
Yeah, and actually, I was really excited this episode too because we saw a bunch of TIE interceptors
Yeah,
and TIE bombers, and I don't think we've seen bombers before, but you don't see interceptors too often. That was pretty cool.
yeah. According to Star Wars Explained, we haven't seen them since Return of the Jedi.
I don't even remember them being in Return of the Jedi, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. No, they have Tie fighters and interceptors in Return of the Jedi.
That's awesome. I was a huge, probably my favorite thing in Star Wars was the original PC DOS fucking TIE Fighter game. I adored that game.
Yes,
and I was always very fond of the Imperial ships. I actually went out and bought there's a new Lego TIE bomber. I bought it. I'm like, I fucking need this. If I buy this, people give me an interceptor.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I love TIE fighters too. I love their fucking sound. And we were talking about how like on Andor, they actually made TIE fighters seem scary,
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
such a dime a dozen. But I actually thought they were pretty oppressive here. And I actually really liked when Din went around just like taking them out this episode too.
yeah. Although I would definitely pick the newer ships over the older prequel ships in terms of like looking cool anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of that, wouldn't you say that Bo-Katan ship kind of looks like Darth Maul's? Oh no, not Darth Maul's ship. It looks like the Jedi
Jedi
Starfighter.
Starfighter.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
the Jedi Starfighter. It looks like Obi-Wan flew a ship like that sort of at one point. Actually, I believe the Transformers crossover Obi-Wan figure from like 20 years ago was the ship that looks like Bo-Katan, sort of.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember exactly what it's called though.
Yeah. Well, it has that design. I always like how like the Imperial stuff kind of comes from the Jedi stuff, and like the Empire stuff comes from the Republic stuff. It's cool how that merges like that. And then I guess like the Mandalorian stuff's kind of mixed in there too.
No, because see it is a Jedi Starfighter, and it's a little more triangular in shape.
Oh,
And it looked like they had that, like the wings came up. Almost looks like the sword in Halo, but with the wings, the things don't move.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to say about the old Mandalorian?
No, I guess that's pretty much it, and we'll see where it takes us next week.
Sweet. Okay, so we're gonna be down one Pedro Pascal, but I think we're gonna be up one Shazam, right?
Oh shit, that's this weekend. Oh man, I gotta find some time to go see that.
Yes, and I have to find some money too, so I gotta see if I can pay for it. But yeah, so Brian and I will be back next Thursday. Well, we'll record on Thursday, and the video comes out on Friday. But we'll see you guys in 1 week to talk about Shazam and the Mandalorian episode 4. See y'all.